Powered by Sky River Casino. Sky's the limit on 98 Rock.
Hey, welcome back. It's the BS. My name's Jason Bailey. There's Nikki D, and there's Nelson. Kyle off to do his sports show down the hall. The only people that understand me are my people at the bureau. I'm telling you.
Sure.
He's so excited you're here, he can't even get it out.
I'm sitting here talking with Special Agent Crosby Brackett, and I'm sitting here going, telling him stories. I told him the story I told her earlier today on the show about the guys at the grocery store and whatnot. He doesn't look at me as I'm crazy, right? Because everything is up for grabs, correct? Right?
He's just being polite.
I'm actually assessing you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that's interesting because I was assessing you as you were listening to his story, and I did notice, to your credit, Agent Buck Wagon cover,
Thank you,
Bailey. I did notice when you said about the dropping of the bag and not looking up, his eyes kind of got a little wider, like he was giving you like a heads up, like, you know what,
Like he was
you might be
impressed?
on to something.
Was that impress you? The bag thing? When
It did. It did.
Right?
See,
that's not something a neophyte would know.
Right.
I've like got this uncanny born ability.
Oh, God.
To
And
be-
identity.
To sniff out the bad guys.
to be in the bureau. I'm telling you. Unfortunately, I'm 48. And there's not much use for me.
Did you give him a waiver for his age?
He might get a waiver.
Oh, you might get a waiver.
All right, well, we might have to put that together sooner than later.
It's legal to lie, right? You can lie. Yeah, so, okay, just making sure. Like,
I am so good at that, by the way. I am really a good liar.
You might get a waiver, he said.
So one of the things we talked about, this class that I go to every week over at the FBI headquarters is a civilian class that we go and we learn about the FBI. And, everybody thinks they know about the FBI just because of what you might see on TV or read on the internet or so on and so forth. But I promise you, you probably don't. I mean, they do such great work. It is absolutely fascinating and amazing how our freedoms are saved on a daily, if not hourly basis by the people at the FBI. You have no clue, absolutely zero clue. I don't have any clue other than the clues that I get from this class. But one of the topics of conversation that we had, sir, was the civil rights matters. And it was fascinating. It was a little uncomfortable, a little awkward, as the conversation usually is when you have different races in a room. But it was a good conversation and an important conversation to have. If you had to kind of sum that up for our audience right now listening, what would be the message that you would want to tell them about what the FBI does with civil rights matters today?
Okay, well, I think it's probably an important topic, particularly at this time, with everything going on over in Israel.
Yeah.
We, like many terrorist incidents, there ends up being a lot of discourse in society sometimes over it. Sometimes other people that with like-minded thinking of the terrorist decide, it motivates them to attack or go after other people. But also on the other side, people that were attacked sometimes feel it's okay to now go ahead and really
rebuttal.
seek retribution. We normally see an increase in civil rights offenses after that. I can say this, that no matter which side you're on, the FBI will investigate it if it involves violence or a threat of violence against a certain person because of their ethnicity.
And not just violence, but also the vandalism part comes into play. And we had different exercises that you all gave the class, and we had to kind of figure out if this would be a civil rights matter or not. And for the most part, they were cut and dry. But when you interfere with someone's place of worship through vandalism, that's a crime.
It's a crime.
Yeah, it's a hate crime.
More important than hate crime, right?
So, thank you. Yeah, it is a hate crime.
And so once you add that civil rights component, does it automatically elevate it to the federal level?
Not automatically.
Okay.
And in fact, in California, they have very strict hate laws in California, unlike many states where the federal system gets stricter punishments in other states. So a lot of times, hate crimes in California, we do defer to local and state investigators because they will get a stricter punishment many times. But it's something we assess with the prosecutors. And if it's an offense we believe should be prosecuted, and the federal system will get a stricter sentence, then we'll prosecute it federally. But it's really up to the U.S. Attorney's Office if they want to do that.
And it's not always cut and dry. And actually, there's a lot of gray when it comes to what would be considered a hate crime. I know I asked a few questions regarding a scenario. It wasn't a real scenario, but just something that was in my head. If you have two individuals, because like when people get angry, they have a tendency to scream slurs, right? And I mean, maybe it's just an 80s thing or whatnot, because there's a gentleman in there. He was like, man, back in the day, that's what you did. And he's right. I know it sounds silly because I saw a couple of people laugh, but he's absolutely correct. But to say that out loud, people don't understand it or they don't want to admit to it. So you will scream. Usually it's the gay slur. Mm-hmm. And I said, is that a hate crime if you get into a physical altercation with somebody, not prior, but in the middle or even afterwards, you scream that, whether they are it or not, would that be a hate crime? And that was still kind of a gray area.
That's definitely a gray area. The attack has to be motivated based on
the hate,
based on a characteristic such as, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender. So you actually have to prove that that was the motivating factor for the attack. If something else happened before that and they were already fighting based on the incident that happened before that had nothing to do with those protected characteristics, then it's likely not a hate crime.
Do you get a lot of people that don't understand how the hate crimes work? And they're just screaming hate crime because they think it's a hate crime when it's not?
I mean, that is true. The First Amendment protects speech in the United States, so we get a lot of complaints about people spewing hate or, particularly online with social media, people saying, basically saying things about other races, other religions, and so forth. But if there's no violence, if there's no threat of violence, then there's nothing the FBI can do about it. It's a protected First Amendment activity. As
not a crime, it's just somebody talking about you.
Correct.
But see, here's the scenario is like say you go to a church and you have a slur against whatever religion that is, and you spray paint it on the church. Okay.
Yeah, now that's a crime.
That's a hate crime. Why?
It's vandalism.
Because it's vandalism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were to go and stand out like those idiots with what's a Fred Phelps church,
right?
And you have that sign and you're standing on public property saying the exact same thing.
Just no crime being committed.
No crime being committed, right? Yeah. Then it's kind of weird, right?
It is, but it makes sense. I understand the vandalism is the crime, not what you're actually saying or even what you wrote.
But you add hate crime to the vandalism.
Correct.
Yeah.
So basically, anything that's a hate crime would normally be a crime if there wasn't a element of bias involved in it.
So it's basically they're always a crime, not in every situation, but it's always a crime essentially, and it's just elevated. It's like a hate kicker. You know what I mean?
It is like a hate kicker.
Added charge.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, makes sense.
So what's protocol if somebody feels in any race, in any religion, can experience a hate crime, even though, and I said this earlier and I learned this from class, is that there is a community that obviously experiences hate crimes more than most, which is the African-American community.
Correct.
But what is protocol if somebody thinks they experienced it? Do they go straight to the FBI, fbi.gov/Sacramento, or on Twitter at FBI Sacramento, or do they go to local law enforcement first?
Well, it really depends. You can report it to both. I would say if your life is an immediate threat, then you should definitely call 911, and they will respond right away. The FBI isn't set up to respond right away, but certainly we'd like to get complaints of hate crimes, and that way we know about them, and we can look into them and certainly work with our local and state partners to address those.
Even better, you can call 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip at tips.fbi.gov. I know it's a lot, but we'll have that on our social media. I'm sure if you Google FBI Sacramento, it'll have all that information there as well. On a regular basis, like roundabout percentage number-wise, what do y'all get over there weekly, monthly, as far as hate crimes and complaints go?
I mean, it's hard to say. There's ebbs and flows. I think just this week we've gotten
So it had to be an uptick recently.
Yeah, there's definitely an uptick this week. I think just yesterday we probably got almost a dozen just yesterday.
Can you say what they were? Like, do you know, was it more towards Middle Eastern, Muslim, is it changing because of what we're seeing on TV?
Yeah, most of it is related to the Israel, Palestinian, Israel, Hamas situation overseas.
And then you see the story, and I forget which state it was, where the crazy guy kills the kid, with and it was hate based,
Correct.
but because of, and that's part of the power of the media for the bad, is that it starts to get people, especially that live in fear, and which most of us do to an extent, then you're like, okay, and I'm reading too much online, and makes you do horrible, horrible things.
Yeah, and a lot of the complaints we get are people spouting off on social media. Somebody sees a post and they report it to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most common complaint we get in this realm.
How often, because people are stupid, they'll post these things on social media, and I know the conversation is always had about your First Amendment rights on social media. Yeah, you can say whatever you want. They are private entities, and they can block it, take it off, and ban you or whatever the case may be, just like we can do on our social media. That's not your First Amendment right. But if they allow it, you can say it. The problem is, well, it's a problem in general, but the problem is when it gets to the actual aggression part, the physical part, that's when the FBI goes back and looks at your digital footprint and puts a case against you, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you got to keep, that happens, I'm sure, often, for people that are posting that stuff.
It is. And that's a difficult thing, even for supervisors in the FBI deciding, when something comes in. Sometimes it's really in a gray area. There's a person there who's spouting off, and you can tell they have a hatred towards a certain group, and you're very worried that they might do something. But if there's no incitement of violence, they're not encouraging others to commit violence, they're not saying they're going to commit violent acts, then sometimes we have to close it because they have a First Amendment right. And certainly we all took an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States, and that's what we have to do.
And the really bad guys know how to pervert that, don't they, and skirt that line.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
They do.
It's really interesting. I thought about this when this part of the class was happening on Tuesday, is how important, you look at your resume for a job, but, we're never taught this as kids, for maybe a little bit, but it's not harped on, as far as everything that we do, especially now with social media, ever since the inception of it with MySpace or Friendster, right, is a digital footprint that is the resume of your life. So if something were to happen at any point in your life, and we all change throughout the years, you guys can go all the way back to that and say, oh, so if you got you've got a clean record and something happens and you're like, no, that was not the case, then you're clear. But you go back and you're spewing stuff, even if you think it's funny, that's going to come back and bite you, right?
Potentially could, yes.
Yeah.
And nothing's ever really deleted, is it?
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah,
even if you wipe
it.
your feed, right,
Mm-hmm.
Twitter still has a copy of it somewhere.
True.
Yeah. You got any questions for Special Agent Brackett before we let him go, Nikki?
No.
No?
He answered them all.
Yeah. You look frustrated. You look angry.
How do I look angry?
I don't know.
I'm not angry.
Is it an anomaly?
No.
No anomaly?
I learned what an anomaly was because of Finding Nemo. You're going to do that in front of the FBI?
Yeah. He needs to look into that.
I'm sorry.
I need I wasn't thinking.
I need you guys to look into Finding Nemo, please. It's spewing false information to people like Nikki. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I cannot tell you. These guys can. Like every day, every Wednesday when I come in, all I'm talking about is this class.
He loves the class.
It is. And I can't sit still. And this thing's 3 hours long. I'm sitting still. No phone, no watch. I'm just eyes up, jaw dropped every single time. So thank you for doing this class. Now, this class is not just for me. This is a class that the FBI puts on in different...
Oh, now he'll say it because he's sitting across
Yes.
from you. I just like it to be known on the record, Special Agent, that we set it straight as he tries to misrepresent sometimes.
Don't tell him that.
I want to...
Oh, we can't tell him your stuff. We can tell him mine.
Yes, absolutely.
No.
1-800-CALL-FBI for any tips, or tips.fbi.gov, and fbi.gov Sacramento/Sacramento, on Twitter at FBI Sacramento. Special Agent Crosby Brackett, thank you so much, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, give us a minute here. Hang on.
The Daily Show.